Hello, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my worst financial mistake. Let's go. It'll be no surprise to a lot of you, it's a car. But I want to show you exactly what I mean when I say worst financial mistake, because it goes further than just the cost of the car and the first year's finance that I paid on the car. There are also other elements that make this one particularly painful in my case. So when I got my first job as an accountant, I kind of felt like I'd made it. You know, I had to have something to show for all of the years of study, right? Well, maybe not so, but initially I felt like that's exactly what I needed. So I did what most people do at that time. I went out and financed a car. The car I went for was a Mercedes C220 AMG spec, so I paid quite a lot more actually than the base model to, from a distance at least, appear like I was rich. And it must be said, the first time I got in the car, I did feel good. I drove it back from, I think it was around London, so it was about a 2-hour drive. I had the music blaring, it had the panoramic sunroof, the music was great. And I remember the first thing I did was drive it straight to see my dad and just show him this car. And this for me probably was the first telltale sign that maybe this wasn't the best purchase. So to be fair to my dad, he was really excited for me. He came out, showed amazing interest, took for a drive and everything. But I don't know what it is. You kind of in your mind have what this item or vehicle is going to do for you and how people are going to react. And it never quite pans out that way. That's not to say it was bad, but I don't know, it just never quite fills that void of making you feel as good as you thought it would. At least in my opinion. Nevertheless, I drove this car. All was well for the first month, right up until the point where that first payment came out of my account. The car was around £17,000. I split my payments over 5 years, so 60 months. And this came to £256 per month for 5 years. The reason it was down at £256 per month is because I did put some money towards it. I actually traded in my old Mercedes, which looking back was a perfectly good Mercedes. I do not know what was going through my mind, but I traded it in. So that car cost me £2,500. And I think I must have got around £800 Part X, but at the time I was just so excited. I was like, take it, here are the keys, give me my new car, without really thinking too much into it. So made a huge L, huge loss on that one. I also put an additional £1,000 towards the car, so that brought my total deposit to about £1,800. But as I just said, the car that I traded in cost me about £2,500, so the actual cost of that deposit to me was about £3,500, although the dealership only considered it to be around £1,800. So there's another quite a big loss to take in 1 month. So of that £17,000, with the deposit the dealership took account for, that brought the remaining balance to around £15,000, which was to be spread over 60 months, which as I said came to £256 per month. Therefore, the total cost of that £17,000 car to me was around £18,500 because of the loss I took on the car that I traded in. Now, I drove this car for around 14 months, there or thereabouts, and over the course of those months, I started to go from loving this car that embodied success and my degree and all of the hard work to loathing it entirely because it was just a constant drain on my income at the point I was trying to save for my deposit. It even got to the point where I was trying to save so hard for my first house that I started cycling to work. So I was cycling past a car that I was paying £250 a month for to just sit there just so I could save the fuel. Now, if this sounds ridiculous to you, it's because it was. It was absolutely insane. But I couldn't really at the time see a way out of this finance scheme. However, I knew I had to do something. And this is where I take probably the second biggest loss on this car. So over the 14 months, I paid around £3,500 on the financing, that £250 per month. I then factored in a deposit loss of the £1,000 I had to pay up front. Also, the £1,600 loss that was on my original car that I traded in. And then this is where the next big hit comes from, which is I decided to sell the car through We Buy Any Car. They will buy your car off you and clear your finance if you have outstanding finance on it. So it is quite a good way to get rid of a car that you don't want to pay for the remainder of the term. However, to do this, I had to give them an additional £1,000 to clear the finance and take the car away from me. So effectively, what happened for that 14-month period was that I made a loss of £7,500 for the privilege of driving around a slightly used 2-litre diesel Mercedes. Yes, that did not feel good. However, it doesn't stop there, and this is an element that I think a lot of people don't necessarily think about when they tie up their money in these car finance schemes. So, had I kept my old car, continued to save, I effectively would have been able to buy a house a year earlier. During that time, I did track this house that I'm in now had gone up in a year by about £5,000. So instantly, I've lost another £5,000 on top of the loss I've just mentioned just to own this finance car. It also gets a bit worse than that, which is that had I bought the house earlier, continued to save and had that £7,000 ready for me at the point of moving in, I could have put that towards an overpayment on the house. This overpayment effectively would have been an additional deposit, and I could have applied it against the mortgage. It would have saved me over a year's worth of mortgage repayments and £5,500 in interest alone. That is crazy. And this is the main point I wanted to highlight. At 31 now, I've realised that I can appreciate a really nice car, but having one, I found I was externally motivated by people's reaction more so than what it felt like for me to be in it. I enjoy a nice car, don't get me wrong, but not at the cost of being able to be mortgage free earlier or just having more money to do things that for me actually matter, spending time with family, going on holidays, anything like that. So this is where I made the decision that I would not buy another finance car ever again in my life. Whether we like the thought of it or not, financing a car always benefits the lender. The entire point of car finance is to be able to sell it to people that couldn't necessarily afford the upfront payment. It's designed to make you buy things that you can't afford. And for that privilege, you're always going to pay more, regardless of what the adverts say. When you break it down and look at this and look at examples like this, the amount of money that I lost just for that 14-month period alone is astronomical. And when you compound that over 15, 20 years, you're going to be leagues apart from someone who didn't go and finance a car. I do want to caveat this though and just say, if cars for you are something that internally make you really happy, it doesn't matter if people like the picture on Instagram or make a comment, you just love driving new cars and luxury cars, then maybe this is a good thing for you, and maybe this is why you get up and go to work in the morning. Absolutely great. But from my experience and what I see in the economy around me, I don't necessarily think that's what's happening with a lot of people. And so I think it's just worth saying that when you see a lot of these new cars and you kind of feel like you're being left behind, the vast majority of them are on finance, and it ties people to their jobs, it ties people to these work commitments. It means that they cannot pay off other aspects of debt earlier. It means they can't invest into their future earlier with more money. And so even though it does make you feel like you might be behind driving a slightly older car or one that hasn't got finance or anything like that, just remember that the vast majority of people are in the same boat. They're just paying to not have that portrayed to everyone. So what have I done since then? Well, I have bought really cheap used cars with low mileage that nobody wants. And I have to tell you, they have been some of the best cars I've ever owned. After having that Mercedes when I was worried if someone dinged it in a car park, or I would park 4 miles away from the Tesco entrance just so I could have 2 spaces to myself, worrying if any damage happened, how much it would cost, how much tyres cost, all of that headache, the finance coming out every month, to jumping into a £1,800 Mazda that was 20 years old, had 50,000 miles on it, was amazing. In actual fact, I went to my dad's house one time and the neighbour reversed into it. She's a lovely lady, and had that been my Mercedes, I think I genuinely would have reacted very differently. But having this old car gave me just such a different outlook, and I just went out, I made sure she was okay, and then that was it. You know, I didn't want any money for it. I literally got I got some hot water, popped it out. It didn't look amazing, but it's an old car. Who cares? That freedom on the road that I now have far outweighs the feeling that I had having a new car. And this is the approach I take going forwards now, which is that if I can't buy it within one paycheck, I just won't have it. A car is a depreciating asset. You can barely even call it an asset. So why am I going to tie my money up into something like that? Because it might portray me in a different way, when I can invest into things that maybe aren't seen, that give me more freedom. So there we go. A brief overview of my worst financial mistake ever. It's probably been the best life lesson I've had. I'm glad I did it earlier, so that I've almost had this awakening into what I want to do with my money and how I want to build wealth and freedom over having these material things. So in that respect, it has been a good learning, but I will never not call it a mistake, because the example I've just given, the money I lost, it haunts me to this day. I'd love to hear your thoughts, whether you think car finance is worth it, if you've had a similar experience. I hope this has helped some of you. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving me a like and a subscribe. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.